Hi everyone, my name's James Koppert. A lot of you know me as the Edger. I'm 40 years old, hard to believe, but I am. And I have ADHD. And I wanted to make this video. I've worked with young people all my adult life and fought a lot for young people with ADHD. And I've still found that it's an extremely misunderstood disorder. I was going to write an article, I do a lot of writing, um, but they don't really get viewed as much as videos. So I thought I'd make a video to bring some understanding, because neurotypical people need to know what it's like to experience ADHD and be living ADHD, what it means. But it's not just about the negatives. I've also done a lot in my life, which has been extremely positive, that I potentially wouldn't have done with ADHD. So as long as you're not bored with me talking, I hope you find this interesting. ADHD, what is it? It's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's classed as a neurological disorder. And in basic terms, the frontal cortex of the brain is overstimulated. It's working a lot faster than neurotypical. Neurotypical means your normal people, so not autism, ADHD, dyspraxia, any of that. They're your kind of average population. So the way the medication works for ADHD is that it overstimulates the overstimulated part of the brain, and anyone that knows anything about electricity, if you've got two positives, it then cancels each other out with sound waves and all things like that. So that's how it kind of works. And if you didn't have ADHD and took ADHD medication, it would be the same as taking speed, amphetamine. You would be absolutely kind of buzzing around, like hyperactive and everything like that. So yeah, I was diagnosed at a young age, and my parents kind of described me as a baby. I would cry continuously. I would never settle. I screamed non-stop. It was very, very difficult for my parents to raise me as a baby. It must have been really horrible for them. And I must have been crying because it was very difficult to experience because of sensory issues and all things like that. So as a baby, I must have been upset. There's no studies of baby because you can't really diagnose a baby with ADHD. So everything's looking back on retrospect, and there isn't much evidence or studies done on that kind of thing. I would love to do it one day. We'll have to see. But as well, yeah. So, and when I was a toddler, my parents tell the story that I was referred to social care because I was constantly in hospital in A&E with cuts, bruises, lots of different accidents and things like that. And the legend says that the social worker came round and watched me for like 2 seconds and was like, "It's okay, I understand," and left, because I was that hyperactive. That I was just like, a bit like Speedy Gonzales, just everywhere and into everything, doing everything. And again, it must have been quite difficult for my parents to manage. I remember my kind of early primary school days. So I went to initially in a primary school in Coventry, and it's a big comprehensive school, huge kind of primary school of an inner city, and I really didn't enjoy it. Found it extremely difficult. I didn't have any friends. I can't remember. I think there was a couple of girls that maybe spent some time with me, but I didn't have a best friend, and I didn't get invited to birthday parties. I still vividly remember just going up to people saying, "Please, can I play with you?" and then saying no. And I often used to just have to play on my own and invent my own games. I used to like autumn because the leaves would fall out the trees, so I used to play a game where I'd catch the leaves in the trees just because no one else would play with me. I used to catch worms when it was raining and put them on the grass to save them so they didn't get trampled on. And all things by myself. I also remember things like just being very strange and weird. I was the weird kid as well as the insanely hyperactive kid. So it was time to go in. So I'd lie down and pretend I was dead. And the dinner ladies, I even remember saying, "He's such a strange child." And I think that was just to get that attention. I was very lonely at school, and to get attention off someone, even if it was negative. I also used to get quite angry with the other kids, and maybe it was the emotional thing of being left out, but also ADHD makes your responses very fast. and that's been a theme that I've had to control. People who kind of knew me around the age of kind of leaving school onwards knew that I could be quite a violent person, and I'm strangely good at it, because when I used to have fights, it was almost like time would slow down. Literally, it felt like that, because I could almost see what someone was doing before they could do it and respond. And again, that's the ADHD mind working really quickly, which is one of the reasons that ADHD has continued to be passed on throughout the generations, due to the fact that if we look at the times when you were in a village as a hunter-gatherer, you would have raiding parties. The first person that would draw their sword and be able to defend themselves and think instantly like that and react to someone with ADHD, which is why it's continued to be part of our kind of human development. So but and not only that, in primary school, I found it extremely difficult, because a lot of the teachers absolutely hated me. Like, there was one teacher particularly who I remember doing my homework, and she tore it up because she said I didn't use the right pencil, and it wasn't anything to do with that. It's just because she couldn't stand me, and she used to make my life very difficult. And one of the problems with ADHD is you stand out. You can't see this, but look, this is what my foot's doing while I'm doing this. Yeah. My hands are all fiddling. You've probably noticed I'm fiddling with something. I'm always moving constantly. I've learned when I'm doing videos through work and conferences, and even just at meetings at the table, that I have to sit still. So this half is quite still, and below me is always moving. So that's another kind of theme. Even at 40 years old, I still haven't controlled that. At work, I have something under my desk so I can keep moving my feet around without annoying people. It's like a little thing on a helix that I can just move around and keep moving. So yeah, it was very difficult, to be honest, in my childhood. When we moved up north to a little village school in Brompton by Sordon, and that was easier. Again, I didn't really have any friends, or I did, but I only was in a short period of time, and I would be very emotionally invested in those relationships. I'd get a friend and they would be my entire world, and again, I think that overwhelmed people, and then if they hurt me, I would be devastated. So one thing that ADHD children and adults feel is a very heightened state of emotion. So when you're passionate about something, you're very passionate, which can be beneficial to a girlfriend, because, for example, when I'm in love with someone, I'm deeply in love with them. I feel things extremely deeply. So, my partner, I absolutely worship the ground she walks on, and extremely loyal because of that. It's the same with the friendships as well, earlier on, where they were my world, and I would be heartbroken and devastated. Even I remember I lost a toy, and I was so emotionally invested. It was a little white Lego man. I had him from being little. And I being an adult now, looking back, I was in mourning. I was grieving for days when I made it a parachute, and a gust of wind blew it away, and I never found it again. And I was literally mourning for days. So our emotions, from anger to love to heartbreak to happiness, a level 50 times higher than other people. And again, just look what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. And again, it can be really irritating for some people, especially if you're in a relationship with them, to have someone that's always moving. Your sofa's always rocking when you're sat with them and things like that. So, but yeah, and everything, even from sex as well. Sex is almost a spiritual thing, and I've spoken to other people with ADHD. So, a lot of people with ADHD have very high sex drives. Can want to, have sex multiple times a day, and it feels. When I speak to other people, it's very different, and when I've spoken to other adults with ADHD about sex, it is a very heightened emotional state where every single feeling is heightened. And like I said, it's almost a spiritual thing. I feel with my current partner, I feel a spiritual connection during sex. It does feel almost like an out-of-body experience, and every single, from the touch on my skin to the orgasm, to the emotional state, to the feeling of love, and everything is at such a heightened level. It's probably quite, it's one of the positives of ADHD, I think. But yeah, back to being a child. So, but childhood was exceptionally difficult. I was always the strange kid. I was always the kid that was just too much for other kids. I was always very upset, quick to anger, just very misunderstood. But on the positive side as well, I remember my teacher saying that I could go to any job and be able to talk my way into an interview because I could react like that. So my reaction times were good. Sports I was always really good at. I could have done exceptionally well if I'd been interested in lots of sports. There were two sports in particular where I was actually classed as being an Olympic hopeful in, but I just wasn't interested or passionate enough to pursue that because I was obsessed with music. It just became natural. Lots of things that I did. So again, one of the positives of ADHD, if you think with sport, your reaction time, if you can focus enough and maintain that focus, your reaction times are pretty exceptional. So stuff like cricket or football, you can respond immediately and do really well. Growing up into teenage years, I have to say were hell. I would go from having it was almost like bipolar, but whereas bipolar people have mania for anything from a week to a couple of months, and then depression from a week to a couple of months. With ADHD, you can have it within 10 minutes, be up and down in between. So I would rapidly go from being so depressed that I was suicidal as a normal day-to-day thing to feeling elation where I'm unbelievably happy. And one of the issues when I was unbelievably happy, I was extremely hyperactive and would do things like I'd just strip naked, or people would say, "Oh, wait, eat a wasp, James," and I would. I'd just do really stupid things. I'd hear some music and be that into it. I'd start dancing on the table in front of everyone. Everyone's laughing at me and I don't even notice because I'm just so into the music and so into the moment and just completely overwhelmed by everything. And I would then realise that I've done something really stupid and be exceptionally embarrassed. And then again, I'd go into a period of chronic depression and be suicidal. And that cycle would be continuous throughout the day. It wasn't nice, and because people used to ask me out just as a joke because it was like, "Oh, go ask out that hyperactive lunatic," and you did kind of know that, and I started to believe I was like really ugly, that I was weird and different, and just no one would ever like me. And it was very hard. I did have some friends. I started to get some friends in secondary school. Some of those friends are very special people that are still very close friends now. And if I actually look at my friends, they were either people who were exceptionally talented, exceptionally intelligent, very musical, or just like almost genius level intelligence. And for some reason, I suppose we were all, or I had trauma as well. People that had like acute trauma, we just seemed to bond, because I suppose we were the outsiders in a little way, and it was just. But again, I'd fall out with them because I was too much. I'd do something stupid, I think it was really funny to suddenly push someone down a hill or something ridiculous, and then I'd feel terrible, and it was just, school was hell. And although I was intelligent and did manage to do quite well, I didn't have any medication. It wasn't really known then, and I would like to. I think if I was at school now and had medication, I'd do exceptionally well, and my life would be very different. I could have gone to university straight after school and done well at college and everything. But I remember one of my college, I did go to college, and one of my college teachers saying, you're the first person ever in something like 20 years of teaching I've ever had to throw out of class. And again, that was because one of my friends was really upset and I was helping them. I arrived a little bit late to class and was a bit angry, and then I snapped at the teacher for saying something and felt that he was picking on me. But actually, he might not have been picking on me. It's just I stood out because I imagine every time he was talking, I was probably the one making a noise, dancing around, being an idiot, cracking jokes, the class clown, you know. If something, you know, what it's like with ADHD, my cats, you probably noticed me look, my cats just walk through. So instantly I look, you know, I can't help it, I can't focus. And a child with ADHD, a lot of young people, and if you're a teacher watching this, so a lot of young people who are in class, they often get frustrated at school because they do try really hard and no one appreciates that. So yes, they might have turned around and spoken to the person behind them that you've told not to speak to 20 times that lesson, but actually they're trying really hard, and if they weren't trying they would have spoke to them 50 times that lesson, and they don't get any recognition for that. They're often seen as troublemakers, of purposely being disobedient and everything. You could tell me something as a kid, James, stop twanging your ruler, and I would do it again straight away, and to a lot of teachers it looked like I was purposely being defiant, when actually I'd just completely forgotten you just told me and didn't even realise I was doing it again. And that was just a very normal, common thing. I was the kid that was put right in front of the teacher's desk every single class. And I wasn't particularly naughty. It was just that I was that kid that they felt that I had to keep an eye on and keep on task and focus and told to shut up and stop distracting everyone else. And the thing is, the sad thing was, I was trying very hard at school. I really did try my absolute hardest. And I don't think I got recognition for that, and I think a lot of kids now don't. Yes, they might be a pain in the arse, but how much more of a pain in the arse would be if they weren't trying. And I really think teachers need to take a step back and actually say to young people, I think it makes a massive difference to kids with ADHD. If, say, for example, that child had not shouted out 20 times, and normally they shout 30 times, to actually at the end of the lesson tell that kid, well done, you know, you've shouted out a lot less today, thank you so much, that really helped my lesson, I really appreciate that. That will help that child, that young person, understand, because of the empathy and the emotional bond that it will create, that will help that kid to try even harder in your next lesson for you. You build up a trusting, respectful relationship with a kid with ADHD, you've got someone really on your side, and that's something teachers really need to know. And also, like, when they're reacting and snapping, what you don't understand is the kids might storm out your classroom, and at that moment they're literally feeling so low that they want to do whatever to themselves, and then a moment later you think they're lying, because they're bouncing up and down as if they're Tigger from Winnie the Pooh. So I got that a lot, where people say, you're not depressed, and then because they'd see me in a hyper mood, and actually I was at that moment, I was really depressed and feeling it quite exceptionally, and people just don't believe you. On to kind of another big thing as well is again peer pressure. If I was in a state of kind of hyperactivity mania, people would, if I was what I call my uptime, if people told me to do something, I'd do it. So if people said, I'll throw that through the window, it'd be funny. Again, because I was desperate for friendships and that, I probably would have done anything. If you told me to run naked through the assembly, I probably would have done it without even thinking or caring. And some, again, I was naked a lot. Anyone that knows me knows that. And I think it was probably a sensory thing as well. It was attention and sensory. So, I can hear things that people can't hear. So I can hear a conversation next door and people can hear a faint mumbling, and I can tell you every kind of word, or certain high-pitched sounds that I could hear when they used to do those teenage things. Even at my age now, I can still hear buzzing that other people can't. And so, yeah, a lot of our senses are heightened. So a lot of ADHD people, if they can focus, will probably make good soldiers as well. The positives, so in adult life, as I say, I'm very loyal. So my friends have a very loyal person. my beautiful partner has a very loyal person. My children have a very loyal dad. It's some of the other positives, as you know, some of my fan base knows that I've performed all over the world. I remember I was playing in bands as well, and people would be, my bandmates would be like, "Aren't you nervous?" And I'm like, "No, I just can't wait to get on," because we don't. A lot of things are easy for us to do. We don't get nervous in the same way for a lot of things. We don't have that anxiety and social anxiety, so I find it quite easy to go on stage. I find it really easy to speak in front of people. I don't find it nerve-wracking at all. I quite enjoy it. It's part of ADHD is that ability to just do things like that. Job interviews again. I've actually been to job interviews where my first job interview, the person interviewing me after being employed for quite a while said, "Oh, did you know on your job interview you actually intimidated me?" Because it was like, "Okay, come on, give me your questions. Yeah, I'm really happy to answer," and just fired away. And again, I could think of the responses straight away. And that leads me on to another thing is in that job interview, I did really well because I'd done so much. So in my really early 20s, I was playing in a band. If I get into something, by the way, I get obsessively into it. So I was into mountain boarding. I saw it and was like, I really want to try that. I had to buy a mountain board straight away, which is a negative thing. People with ADHD are not good at managing money. They impulse buy all the time. That's something you have to learn. You have to learn to save money. You have to learn that you can't impulse buy. Otherwise, you will just kind of spend like that straight away. And it's kind of an emotional feeling thing. I do feel quite strong emotions when I'm buying things, as peculiar as it sounds. It's a strong sensory thing. So if I go in a shop, and I also buy probably more for other people than I do myself, I love giving things, and it's another ADHD trait that's not as well known. I absolutely love buying people presents and giving people things, but yeah, when I go, if I'm feeling depressed or down, one thing that makes me feel better is buying something, which is great for capitalism, but it's not so great for me personally. And that's something I've really had to, and again, it's thanks to my partner, that she's kind of amazing at talking to me and helping me understand things and persuading me, that she's really helped me with that massively. So that's another negative. But again, the positive. So in my early 20s, I was saying, and another ADHD thing is you constantly ramble on and go off topic like I am doing. In my early 20s, I was got into mountain boarding, but I wasn't just satisfied with being into mountain boarding. So I had to get obsessed with and cross it with everything else I like. So I like music. So I got in touch with the International Glossy magazine and said, you need to have some music in your magazine. So I submitted some writing because I liked writing, and I've ended up writing for some of the biggest music magazines there are. But I ended up the music editor for this International Glossy Sports magazine for a couple of years. I also organised and coordinated the music stage at the World Championship mountain boarding event for if I got into a band, I ended up my favourite band in the world, which I've got tattooed on me, is the bass player is my best friend now. When I got into football, the team, it was one of the biggest teams in the world, send me things because you just become obsessive and involved, and you read everything about it, you know everything about it, you're involved in everything about it, you become part of the community in a big way, you volunteer for things, you get to know people because you don't have that anxiety. You're quite happy to ring up someone doing a podcast or write to them, or start your own podcast and get to interview people, or write for a magazine and interview a band and then sell the interview to the biggest music magazine in the world and things like that. That's just, you're just willing and able to do it, and because you're quite amenable as an adult, people are quite happy to engage with you. So one thing is about listening, you have to learn to do, and by doing that, by having to learn, I've actually become a really good listener, which helped with my job. So there's a lot of positives. Also, while I was doing all that, I was also playing in bands, but I was the one making posters and putting on gigs in my own town, doing promotion, working full time, being a dad, running a record label, putting out records, distributing other records from around the world, writing for fanzines. It's probably easy to tell you what I wasn't doing. I barely needed any sleep. I could sleep quite easily on 4 hours a night and still have loads of energy, and what's positive as an adult, and I always tell this for kids with ADHD, because it is a very lonely, difficult place, but as an adult, you learn to kind of manage and control it, and it actually becomes quite people are drawn to you. You've got that energy. You're normally quite a positive person, and people are drawn to that. People want to hang out with you and be with you. So it's actually a really positive thing as an adult. It's almost the switch of the others, and you're a doer. If so I was politically active as well, like very politically active, and I was just doing everything. So as an adult, if you can learn to focus, you can really use it. So in my job, I used to do hundreds of projects in work and be really passionate about that as well, and do really well. And it's wrong to say that we can't concentrate, because if we're into something, we're really into it, and it's almost like the acute opposite. So whereas if I'm not really into something, I'm very distracted, and I can't concentrate whatsoever, and I will procrastinate, and any sound, I'm like, what's that? If I'm into something, like football could be on, and if I'm into that match, or I'm like busy making something that I'm 20 people could walk in the room naked, blowing flames and screaming at the top of their lungs, and I wouldn't even notice. I'd just be completely engrossed in what I'm doing. So yeah, it's a myth that you can't hold your attention, because you really can if you're into something. It's the opposite. I've seen people with ADHD who I remember one girl who had it quite severely and couldn't manage at school at all, and I did a workshop with her in stop frame animation, and out of every single person that was in that workshop, she was the one that was focused, did twice as much as everyone. And I remember speaking to her, and she didn't even notice I was there, because she was that focused on what she was doing. It was brilliant. And we are weird and different, and we do think differently, and again, that's a real positive. So as an adult, that girl in particular was horrifically bullied, which is another theme of school. ADHD kids are often bullied, quite extreme, until if they become good at fighting, and then it's almost the other way. They can be quite dangerous, which isn't good either. But they're more often than not a victim of bullying, and this girl was, and now she is a well-known person in her field. Again, her weirdness and differentness in the field that she's in has allowed her to express herself in a very creative, wonderful way, and she's gone from the strange kid that people used to rip to being a kid with thousands of fans and followers, if not more than thousands. It's wonderful, and I'm really proud of her. But that's the difference as an adult. I can think differently, outside of the box, see a completely alternative view to everyone else, think of solutions quickly, as well. Just another example of how my ADHD brain works really effectively.